Mutant Deviations, Wormo, complete. By TemporalKnight. And thanks again to my beta Grey Raven 09 for his assistance. This chapter gives a bit of a sideways look at how Danny uses his power and the effects of it. Since the full explanation is a while off yet, for the moment, just suffice it to say that there is a reason that his conversation with Taylor is so easily handled and non-confrontational on both ends. Disclaimer: I do not own anything related to Worm. If I did, I would be far more productive. Deviance 01. This place is actually rather nice considering Madison's family doesn't really maintain it regularly, I commented as I fell back on the small bed. She had been right, there was a pull-out couch, though the mattress was a far cry from comfortable. Amy and I had just barely managed to get the bed out after we found the place before she had nearly collapsed onto it, rolling into a small ball with her face covered by her arms. I was at least able to get most of my costume off and roll it up on the floor with my shoes before I followed after her and laid back as well. The bed wasn't quite big enough for the both of us, but Amy was small and she was already curled up, so I just moved enough so that I wasn't quite falling off the bed, and it worked well enough. It was a bit awkward, though after the night we'd had, this was the least awkward thing that seemed to matter. "Do you have to go home?" Amy's voice floated up through her hands. I checked the time on my watch, 6:30 a.m. Nah. My father is probably already gone by now anyway. And even if he isn't, actually, hang on, we might be. Holy cow, we are. I levered myself up and grinned at her over her shoulder. We're close enough that I can actually send some of my swarm to check in on my house. Give me a minute and I'll just make sure that. Taylor, Amy whispered, her voice so quiet that if I didn't have a fly on her shoulder I probably wouldn't have heard her. Can you focus here? I need to tell you something. I let the bee cluster that I had been sending towards my house drift back into its normal patrol pattern and laid my head back down onto the pillow. Sure, Amy. What's up? While I could still multitask, it seemed only polite to follow her wishes. She had saved my life after all. When I heal, I don't always focus on everything. Not all at once. It gets overwhelming to fix everything. And sometimes I can't. When someone is hurt bad, I prioritize. That makes sense. I see a person's whole biology with a touch, so I know everything that is wrong. My power catalogs it and flags any and all issues. But it changes constantly. So I work it down. My power, though, it can do more than I can focus on at once. So I've taken to setting it on autopilot for the small things. Minor cuts and abrasions and contusions, that sort of thing. I don't know what that is, Amy, I murmured. Scrapes and bruises. Anything simple. Things I don't have to worry about, things that my power can just fix. I focus on the big thing, the gaping hole or the broken floating rib about to puncture your stomach, and my power fixes the minor problems on its own. Okay. My chest started to tighten at that. When I got to you, you were really hurt, Taylor. Really hurt. Vicky nearly destroyed your rib cage and bruised your heart in addition to cracking off your rib. I think she thought you were a brute or that Hive was going to give her more resistance or something. Either way, she hit you hard enough that I was only paying active attention to your chest cavity when healing you. Everything else was on autopilot. You shouldn't have been hurt anywhere else. The leg was minor. Just a few scrapes. But it wasn't that simple, was it? I asked, my mouth going dry. Had Amy stopped and I heard a sniffle from her before she continued. Had your construct started acting somewhat independently before I healed you? A little, but only when I sent too many emotions to it. It was weird, but nothing that I was worried about. I was still in control. It was just, I don't know, antsy. I don't mean that as a pun. Please don't take that as a pun, I mumbled, grimacing. Amy didn't even groan at my unintentional bug humor. She just curled up tighter on herself. That makes more sense then. When I healed you, a lot of your mind was still in the swarm. But you shouldn't have been, you should have been in your own head. Except you can split yourself off like that because of how your power works. And my power knew that. It catalogued your construct, the split, as an injury. And I fixed it. I fixed it while I was busy focusing on your chest because I didn't even realize that there was anything else going on until it was too late to do anything about it. It was just a simple switch. One flick and what was a somewhat muddy division became clear. I swallowed and thought through my words before I could get up the courage to say anything. Can you define clear? Hive is running on your subconscious now. It's still using your power, but it's a subset. You should be able to take active control, but when you don't, it's almost like an alter ego? I doubt it'll be able to take control of any new bugs itself, though it may be able to control ones already in your swarm if you don't override it. It may also be able to form itself because technically you want it to form. At least part of you does. I stayed very quiet at that comment, carefully thinking through everything that Amy had said. This should feel like a violation. She had changed something fundamental about me and how my powers worked. I now had a clingy second personality apparently that I wasn't fully in control of with, at minimum, a 12-block radius that could do whatever my subconscious wanted within. God, if I got into a bad enough place it would probably go out and try to kill someone, like Emma, or Sophia. Or Dad. I shuddered. And yet, Amy hadn't done this intentionally and she had saved my life. And she'd told me. Wait. Fuck. Amy, I said, pushing myself up and laying a hand on her shoulder. I pulled her just hard enough that she rolled onto her back. Her eyes were wide and there were tears running down the sides of her face. My heart went out to this frizzy-haired girl who looked seconds away from bolting out the door of the office. Amy, can you work on brains? Yes, the answer was so soft it might as well have been carried by the wind. Damn, I muttered. She made to move, but I didn't let her. I shifted my arm and wrapped her into a hug. It doesn't matter. You fixed me. I can deal with this. I can live with it. Amy sobbed into my shoulder, her head crushing against the crook of my neck and her arms wrapping around my waist. It's okay, Amy. You didn't mean to do anything wrong, you didn't do anything wrong. You saved my life and I can work with this. I mean, it's just my subconscious, right? I just need to stay positive and everything will be fine. Unless you can, change it back. No. Amy's head shook so hard I thought she was going to give me a burn for a second. No. I can't work on brains. I can't, please don't ask me to, please. It's too easy, it's too simple. Just look at what I did to you without even meaning to, Taylor. I broke your powers. I made your construct into something you have babysit because I wasn't paying attention. I could change someone and never be able to change them back to who they were before. I can't work on brains, I can't. Please don't ask me to, please. Okay, I understand. You don't have to, Amy. I was just asking. It's okay. Fuck. There went the easy option. What was that Earth Olaf saying then? Constant vigilance. Right. I'd just have to be careful and watch myself and watch Hive. I could do this. Better than giving Amy a mental breakdown. Which, she may already be having, judging by the crying and the babbling. Perfect. I was already freaking out and fighting off the shaking myself. How was I supposed to deal with calming her down too? I needed to call someone for help. Yet? And just who was I supposed to call? Madison? Tattletale? Miss Militia? That was basically my contact list. I couldn't help it, I started to laugh as I squeezed Amy back. Apparently, my train of thought was utterly lost on her as her own crying slowed and she pulled her head from my shoulder to look at me. Taylor? Are you okay? I just kept laughing and shook my head. I was trying to think of who I could call for advice, or to get help, or who to just talk about this shit to. My conclusion? I need more friends. Hey. You. Madison. Tattletale. Miss Militia. My father. Your aunt. That's who's in my phone right now, Amy. Lot of good all of them are going to do on the therapy front, hey. Amy just blinked up at me and subtly shifted her hand so that it was touching my upper arm. Her eyes widened. Taylor, maybe you should bleed off some of your emotions to your swarm. Not sure I want to do that with Hive in the background right now, Ames, I said, finally getting my giggles under control. I rolled over and laid an arm over my face. Just give me a minute, I'll be fine. I was perfectly able to deal with my problems before I got my powers. I can still deal with this stuff. It's just been a long night. Yet. It has. Of course, that was when my phone, my new phone, started to ring. Groaning, I grabbed for it and flipped it open, barely even pausing to look at the name on the little window. Tattletale. There's no time. If you're in your house, get out. I don't know how he found out, best guess is the PRT, either way it doesn't matter, he knows who you are. Get out. My stomach dropped and suddenly my decision to stop my surveillance this morning seemed like the stupidest idea in the entire planet. I'm not at home. Tattletale breathed out deeply enough that I could almost hear her fingers unclench from the phone. Good. That's good. Don't go home. He's about to call. Don't go home. I'll contact you again when I'm able. The line went dead a moment later and I pulled the phone away from my ear to stare numbly at it. Fuck. Amy just looked between me and the phone. What just happened? My father knows I have powers apparently. And maybe the PRT does too. Amy's eyes narrowed to slits and her mouth narrowed to a thin line. The phone rang again, almost making me jump. Instead I tried to swallow the bile rising in my throat and carefully opened it while raising a finger to my lips as I looked at Amy. Hello, Taylor, my father's voice came through the small speaker. He sounded far more awake than he usually did this early in the morning, even assuming he'd long since finished his coffee. Hi, Dad. I mumbled back. How are you this morning? Fine, I guess, I managed to get out through the lump in my throat. Were you planning to go to school today? How was he being this mundane? We'd said maybe a dozen sentences to each other in the past 3 weeks and this was how he led a conversation after finding out I had powers? No, not really. I'm not really surprised, you haven't attended much from the messages I've received. If you wish, I can help you get the tools for a GED. Thanks Dad. Seriously, what in the ever-loving hell was going on? Of course. There are benefits to being my daughter after all. I frowned. Ah, there it was. Now we got to it. A GED is fairly simple, Dad. I think we both know I'm not necessarily talking about just the GED, honey. No, we were not. And didn't he sound smug about it? How did you find out? There wasn't much point hiding. Besides, that comment was ambiguous enough that he'd have to work for it and he could interpret it any way he wanted to. I have eyes and ears in many places, child. The PRT knows many things and they are not nearly as taken with your scheme as you had thought. It was rather ingenious though, and I commend you on the attempt. I can tell you more about the details when you get home. Why would you do that? Well, we're not fighting, Taylor. There are many benefits to being a part of my organization. I'm working to improve the city after all. You could be a part of that. I could practically see him shrugging through the phone line. You're a supervillain, I said, my voice more surprised than accusatory. This conversation was not going at all like how I had expected or planned. That's a label. My plan has been approved by Accord and others. Your mother died because this world is broken. I'm going to fix it, Taylor. Help me. I shook my head and screwed my eyes shut. It was too much, it was all just too much. I can't deal with this right now. I understand. I'll be here when you're ready to come home, Taylor. And please let me know if you wish for me to take any action against the Barnes or if you want to let the PRT mop things up for us. For the second time that day the line went dead and I was left staring at the phone in my hand. This time, it was me that curled into a ball and cried while Amy tried to wrap herself around me. I don't know how long I stayed like that, though it was long enough that sunlight started to fall through the window on the nearby wall and make its path up the bed. Eventually I managed to get myself under control and pulled my body up into a sitting position, Amy not far behind. I wiped my eyes and looked around the factory's office a bit closer. We're going to need to get a better bed in here if we're going to stay long term now, I said sighing. Yeah, Amy agreed. At least the TV works. Pretty nice setup too, for this type of place. Madison isn't loaded like Emma, but she wasn't poor like, actually, if my father is a supervillain, what the hell are we doing living in a lower middle class neighborhood near the edge of the gang territory? Amy shrugged. The pull-out was small enough that I felt her shoulders move against mine. Maybe he wanted to stay under the radar. Yeah. And make my life miserable just like everything else in this stupid god-forsaken town has conspired to try and do. I had one of my flying clusters bring me a piece of paper that had been balled up in the corner just so that I had something to throw. Surprising even myself, I managed to get it in the wastebasket on the first try. I need to go for a run to clear my head, and if my father is gone I'll see if I can get some of my things from home. Are you going to be okay here for a bit? I think so. If I'm going to be staying here and working with you for now, I want to try and help. I'm not just a healer, Taylor. I can make things too. I'm a full biokinetic. I can make you better bugs. While you're gone, I'll see what I can do to make something a bit sturdier for your swarm. Maybe give you a bit more firepower, make Hive more durable. I blinked and looked over at her. You don't have to do that, Amy. You can just hang out. That's perfectly fine. I didn't say I'd look after you because I expected anything in return. You're dealing with my shit and I messed you up. I want to help however I can, she said, her mouth set and her shoulders square. Smiling, I leaned over and bumped her shoulder. Well, thanks then. But don't stress yourself out too hard. Consider it a side project, okay? As I got up to stretch and reach for my shoes, Amy reached for my sleeve and grabbed my hand. While you're out, can you grab some snacks? M&Ms and Skittles. Also, I need clothes. I looked her over and shook my head. I don't think you'll fit into any of mine. I'm too tall. But I'll see what I can do. I'll be back in a bit, Amy. I hadn't even made it across the room before Amy's phone rang. With the way she grabbed for the phone and held it away from her, you'd have been forgiven for thinking it was a piranha that was going to bite her hand off. Amy, you know, you don't have to. I should, whoever they are, they'll just keep trying, Amy muttered. She flicked the screen and held it up. Apparently she'd left it on speaker since the caller was loud enough for me to hear as well. Hello? Panacea? This is... Don't call me that. Amy practically snarled into the receiver. I grimaced and moved back to lay a hand on her arm. She took a deep breath and continued in a smaller voice, I'm not Panacea anymore. If I'm panacea, then I'm acknowledging that I'm working with New Wave and I'm not working with my family right now. Don't call me that. Of course, we had heard that. I apologize. What should I call you? Amy worked her mouth without anything coming out and looked up at me. I could only shrug in response. It took me weeks to come up with my own name, and that was still borderline villainous. There was no way I was going to be able to help her out here. Just Amy for now. I'll think of something soon. Is this Miss Militia? Yes. Your aunt came to us this morning, Amy. She was worried and wanted to let us know that you had left. I wanted to call and make certain you were okay. Amy shut down. If I hadn't been so used to seeing it in the mirror for the past year and a half, I might have missed it, but now, seeing it right in front of me was almost scary. Her muscles locked up and her eyes unfocused while her nostrils flared and her fingers clenched. I'm perfectly fine. Forgive me, Amy, but you don't sound fine. I said I'm fine. You are welcome to come and stay with the wards in the PRT building for a few days if you would like. Yet? And subject myself to shadow stalkers' needling. Amy scoffed. I tensed at Sophia's hero moniker, though Amy didn't seem to notice. No thanks. That issue may not be a problem for all that much longer. Please, we're just worried about you, Amy. Worried about me continuing to heal people, right? That was not what I said. Amy's hand clenched into a fist and a scowl crossed her face. But it's what you're thinking. It's not enough that your leaky organization betrays my friend, now you have to call me not 5 minutes later and beg me to get back to the fucking hospitals. Is it so much to ask to get just one day off? Amy. No. Fuck you. I'm not going to the hospital today. I don't know when I'm going back. Call me if any of your precious heroes are dying, otherwise leave me alone. She stabbed at the phone and the line went dead. I squeezed her arm and resisted the urge to say something as she turned to look at me. There was a small sheen over her eyes, though no tears spilled. Instead of pushing, I waited for Amy to say something first. I didn't have to wait long. I can't heal right now, I just can't. Do you? Am I a monster for needing time to just, I don't know, recharge? Shaking my head, I pulled her into a hug. Everyone needs time to recharge, Amy. You're not a monster, you're human. Do you want me to stay here for a while? I can call Madison or something to get us some food and pick up some clothes for you. Hell, I could probably call Tattletale too. She'd jump at the chance to prove she could be useful. Tattletale? Amy asked, pulling back and staring up at me with her mouth hanging out. She's being screwed over by Coil 2 and isn't happy about it. I don't trust her, but we've agreed to sort of work sideways with each other until she can prove where her loyalties are. She was the one who called me earlier to warn me not to go home. Oh. Amy frowned. Maybe she does actually mean it when she says she wants to help. I think she's mostly in it for herself, but I've overheard enough conversations between her and my dad that I'm willing to give her the benefit of the doubt, so long as she doesn't screw us over. He's changed enough that I'm not taking his threats lightly. Trying to lighten the conversation a bit, I smiled and poked her shoulder. And you haven't answered my question. I'll be fine. I want to try working on making you a new bug anyway. Go for your run. I saw a shower here when we came in, so don't worry about going easy. Even if there wasn't, I could give you the same lilac-style bacteria I make for myself when I work out. The only appropriate response to that was to gape for a few moments. Finally, my brain caught up with my mouth and I was able to articulate a response. I'm sorry, what? Not a very verbose response though. Amy giggled. I don't like to smell, so a few months back, I altered the bacteria on the surface of my body that produce odors into a different strain. Its byproduct gives off a scent of lilacs instead of the normal gross sweat smell. I saved the memory of the strain and now whenever I work out, I smell like lilacs. That is not fair. That is not fair at all. That is downright cheating. When you have powers. Cheater, I stated with a mock glare as I got up from the bed and moved back to the door for the second time. Amy stuck out her tongue at me in response to my teasing. Amazingly, this time, nothing prevented me from leaving. With any luck, I might actually be able to decompress a bit on this run and finally, start to relax. You'd think by now I would know not to tempt fate. Apparently not so much. I was 3/4 of the way through my run when my patrol clusters felt a disturbance on the edges of my range. A motorcycle appeared to be angling towards my home from the turns on the roadway and it was angling closer and closer as it came. I focused closer on the cycle and the rider and sucked in a breath. Miss Militia. Fuck. Twisting mid-stride, my leisurely jog turned into a mad sprint, as I sent multiple clusters out. One went to my house while several went towards Militia. She was 3 blocks out from the house when the first cluster of flies reached her. I tried to make an arrow but she had just left a traffic light and they were left behind before she even seemed to notice they had existed. Okay. Plan B. The second cluster of honeybees, I stationed further ahead. These were near a stop sign and were sure to get her attention. Unfortunately, she missed those as well thanks to an unlucky passing car. 2 blocks to go. The cluster of roaches and spiders were entering my home now. Fuck. My dad was still there. He hadn't been lying about staying at home. Fuck, fuck, fuck. No more nice cape. I positioned the next cluster directly in front of Miss Militia's face as she made her next turn. She'd have to run right into this one and she'd either see the arrow or she'd get a face shield full of bugs and she'd have to pull over anyway. Oh good. She saw the damn arrow this time. She slowed about a block away from my house and followed my arrow, turning onto a side street. I didn't take a breath of relief since it was all I could do to keep breathing and stay conscious in my mad sprint to get to her before she showed up on my father's doorstep looking for me. Amy? What the hell was Miss Militia doing coming to my house? I had my cluster form a downward arrow in an alley that I was reasonably certain would be secure. She took the hint and parked the bike there, stepping off. I considered getting a mask of insects to cover my face, but considering she was driving right up to my damn house it didn't really seem to matter very much at this point. Yet, my secret identity lasted a long time. Those unwritten rules were a wonderful help for me. I slowed as I finished my run around the corner of the alley and doubled over, hands on my knees, gasping for air and nearly collapsed against the wall. Miss Militia started to move towards me to assist though I managed to wave one hand towards her and lifted my head to glare at her. Instead of trying to talk through my attempts to breathe, I pulled a few bugs from the swarm to me and keeping up my glare, I used them as my mouthpiece. What the hell were you thinking? Coming to my house in broad daylight? Doesn't this break every damn rule there is? I'm sorry, I know this breaks decorum. I was intending to use the excuse of asking about an incident at your school involving a cape if questioned by your family. Honestly, going by the records we've been able to find, I didn't really expect there to anyone at home besides yourself, Miss Militia said nodding to me. I would have called to set up a more appropriate meeting, but I didn't have your phone number. You have mine, but this isn't really something that could wait until you called first. I tried to keep up the glare though I was forced to admit that she had a point. My dad was barely ever actually home and the only reason he was there now was to bait me into joining him, so, yeah. Shaking my head I huffed and let the swarm disperse, finally able to catch my breath enough to speak on my own. How do you even know who I am and that I'm a cape? Well, Miss A Bear, you told me. That brought me to a stop. When the hell had I done that? I'd had basically one interaction with Militia and it was as Hive. All I had done was say that Sophia had, oh. Crap. Fuck. I said too much when I set you on Sophia, didn't I? Militia sighed. Yes, I'm sorry, but you really did. She targeted you quite single-mindedly. Perhaps if she had spread her bullying around more it would have been different, but as it was, she trailed off and shrugged. You stopped going to school after the incident. An incident that has trigger all over it, Miss A. Bear. I'm sorry, but there is almost no way to investigate Sophia Hess and not find you at the core of it. Yet, should have guessed having an alibi wouldn't have helped. Went to school for nothing. Perfect, I sighed, leaning against the alleyway. I tossed a slip of paper towards her with my new phone number on it. I really hoped that Tattletale had gotten a good plan for this phone. Whatever. Here, this is my number. Don't come to my house. Call me next time you need to talk. Now what is so important that it couldn't wait? First, allow me to clear up a matter. I waved her on. Are you indeed the swarm or is it a separate entity from you? Judging by how you were speaking through it a few minutes earlier I would tend to say the former, though I would be remiss not to at least ask. I frowned and looked at her. It's complicated. Let's just say that I control the swarm and leave it at that. So you are Hive and Queen then? I am Queen in costume and Hive is part of my power set, yes. Your range is impressive. Yes. She stayed quiet for a few seconds though I knew phishing when I heard it and wasn't going to give her anything on that aspect at all. She held up a hand in surrender and moved on. As to what I was coming to speak about, Lady Photon came to talk with us this morning. She had mentioned that her niece was staying with you as of last night. So this was about Amy. I shouldn't be surprised considering how that call had ended earlier. That's correct. She's not at my house though, so don't bother going there to check. Okay. I tried calling Amy this morning, she was not very keen to speak with me. I just want to make certain that she is okay. Her aunt was very worried about her. We all are. I narrowed my eyes and shook my head. Look, Amy is fine. Is she hurting? Yeah, she's a teenager who's going through some major trauma, we both are. But she'll be fine. She's my friend, I'm helping her, and I'm going to find someone who she can talk to if she needs it. You don't need to worry about her freaking out and going off the deep end or anything. She just needs some time to get things together. God, it hasn't even been 6 hours and you people can't even leave her alone for that long. Miss Militia held up her hands and shook her head. That is not what I am saying, please don't put words in my mouth, Miss A. Bear. I am simply trying to make sure that she is okay and that she doesn't need anything. Amy cut me off before I could finish that message. You're assuring me of that at the moment, so my job is done. Please let her know that she can always call either me in particular or the Protectorate as a whole and we will put her in touch with whoever she wishes. I'll pass it along, I huffed. Is that all? Just 2 more things and then I'll go. She grimaced but soldiered on. I don't mean to be insensitive, but I do have to ask, do you know if she intends to keep healing now that she is no longer with New Wave? There are legal ramifications if she does, as neither of you are of the age of majority. I frowned, not having considered that. Not that it really mattered since Amy apparently wasn't going to the hospitals anytime soon. I honestly don't know. It's not my place to ask her. She has issues with it at the moment, that's all I know. I'm not going to push her. Like I said, she's my friend and I have very few of those. I have no intention of alienating the ones I do have. While regrettable, that is understandable, Miss Militia said. Now for my last issue. You should know, Miss A. Bear, that steps are being taken to prosecute the personnel involved in the campaign against you, including the staff and faculty of Winslow. They were apparently receiving kickbacks for having a ward on the grounds and Blackwell didn't want to lose that. She, and the others involved, will be dealt with shortly. My eyes narrowed. 2 days ago that would have been exactly what I wanted. Now, God damn it! Leave Madison Clements alone. I'm sorry. Madison. Leave her alone. Everyone else is fair game, but leave Madison out of whatever reckoning you have going on. She apparently went nearly suicidal when she thought the other two had killed me. If I hadn't told her I was alive the other day, I think she might have gone all the way in a few more weeks. She was as much a victim as I was, just in a different way. I'm working things out with her. Leave her alone. I'll make sure to pass that along, Miss Militia said, nodding. Be that as it may, what I meant to say was that, with the assurance that there are consequences involved for crossing the line, and that we can clean up our messes, would you not consider working with the wards, Miss Bear? I rubbed my temples and looked down at the ground as my other hand waved towards the direction of my house. Few problems with that, ma'am. 1. I just don't trust you. Not you in particular. The organization. People like Shadowstalker get in and are given enough free rein to do whatever they want until people like me almost die. I would have died if not for Amy. 2nd, and this is the big one, the PRT is full of holes. If I go there, I'm screwed. I can't go home anymore thanks to you people. I don't understand. Less than a few hours after you figure out who I am, a supervillain in this city learns my name, my cape identity, where I live, and is calling me up trying to recruit me. I can't go home anymore, Miss Militia. Not that I like going home anyway, but now the option is closed, thanks to you. The PRT outed me to a supervillain. So thanks for that, good thing that Amy and I found a new place to hole up last night, hey. At least she had the decency to stagger back at that declaration. The way her power started shifting the form of the weapon in her hands almost every second was an even bigger indicator of how much on the defensive I had her. I didn't have to tell her that the supervillain was my own father. That's we never who. Yet, probably better if I don't say. It's a fairly cordial invite at the moment and I get the feeling I can still turn it down without him coming after me with a kill squad. So I'm just going to stay in my nice new lair for a while and let things cool down. Your father either won't notice I'm gone or won't care. There's a reason I've been able to get away with not going to school since January, ma'am. Now are we done? Because I really need to find some food after sprinting here to keep you from tipping of the fucking supervillain that I'm still around. Yes, we're done. I'm sorry, I never meant to. What's done is done. This is half my fault anyway for tipping my hand. Just don't go to my house. Call me if need to contact me again. Have a nice day, Miss Militia. Without waiting for a reply, I turned and started jogging back down the way I had come, keeping a few bugs on her to make sure that she left and didn't head towards my father. All in all, that could have gone worse. Thanks for watching.